well, that would be the orthodox interpretation of
I'm
course.
asking you.
Sure. I mean, but they are not as, obviously they're not as familiar with the Chinese language and the koan tradition as Dogen is. And they're very much familiar with Japanese Buddhism and tend to read into a Japanese perspective that is perhaps not necessarily the one that Dogen is presenting.
Let me go back to your question for a moment, though. You said Dogen seems unapproachable, I think was the word you used.
Yeah.
Well, okay, what makes him seem unapproachable compared to other figures from the...
Well, certainly that's very much me coming across. This is my experience with Dogen. I find his writing very difficult, very subtle. But I think I would say that that's probably borne out in the enormous volume of text trying to explain his writing. So we don't have just have translations, but for every page of translation we might have 200, 300, 400 pages of commentary on it. So there seems to be a huge enterprise behind trying to discern what he intended.
Right.
And I wonder to what degree is that our problem here in this time and place, and to what degree was this the case for Dogen's teachings the moment they left his mouth or the moment they left his hand?
Yeah, and again, there's the editing process, but let me just give a story. We've all been involved with translating different parts of it over the years, and I was looking at what I thought was a fairly simple sentence in one of in the Buddha Nature fascicle of Shobogenzo, and by now there must be 6, 8, pretty reliable translations that you can turn to, including the Stanford one that's on the website, which is great and has like amazing annotations. But just if you go back to like the one sentence, it wasn't heavily annotated, this one particular sentence, and I thought it wasn't that big a deal. But my point is, I looked at 6, 8 translations. They all had a different thing. I mean, I couldn't really. I got more confused after looking at them all. And is that our fault or is that Dogen's fault? Are we expecting too much from him or reading too much? Do we accept that it is all going to fit together and make sense? And maybe maybe it doesn't. I mean, all those questions do come up, I think, in the process. But yes. And then number 2. Yes.
There were some questions about Dogen writing in Chinese style as far as poetry earlier, as to whether it was genuine. And since one of my areas of teaching, I studies Chinese and Japanese art and painting. The Japanese were copying Chinese painting at that time, and they were never really as good at this as the Chinese paintings, the Japanese copies. So I was just going to make that parallel. That could be a similarity.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes?
Regarding the suddenness of awakening, or step-by-step gradual, could the suddenness that seems sudden maybe because of work done in previous lifetimes that might be step-by-step and then is accumulated and unfolds, looks like very sudden now in this lifetime?
You're the only person qualified to answer that. Because that's a question that scholars we refuse to answer that kind of question.
How come?
Because it's sort of a religious question.
Reincarnation, is
Yeah.
that religious?
Well, if we were going to answer that, we would have to say we believe in reincarnation. But no scholar will say that. Buddhists will not do that. I could answer it like as a Buddhist, but then I wouldn't. That's not the person sitting up here. The person sitting up here is the scholar. That's why we won't answer. It sounds very reasonable to me, actually. Just as a common sense thing, sure.
So, somebody's going to answer?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm not in the wrong.
What's that?
I'm not in the wrong, Jill. I'm not the victim here. You guys.
Okay. There's no such thing.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Awakening? What are you talking about?
give it here.
Sudden? How could it be sudden or gradual? There's no such thing. Is Santa Claus sudden or gradual? That's my answer. He's really fast, actually.
Then if we have.
Gets all around the world in one night. I don't know if it's sudden, but it's fast.
There is no sudden, from my point of view. If we are in the present moment, what is sudden and what is gradual? Tell me. I don't find it. I don't see it.
Right, okay, that's the same answer.
That's
Anyone else in the panel?
she wants you guys.
The sudden and gradual thing, I agree with Griff. I don't, it's not a meaningful question to me, excuse me, but, because it's all sudden. I mean, well, I guess Chino had this synthesis of sudden and gradual, sudden awakening and gradual practice and so forth. But taking that aside, the question of rebirth, who knows? As a Buddhist, I sort of believe in a certain way. It's not the same as the incarnation, but I had an interesting discussion with Stephen Batchelor earlier this year, and there's this famous debate between him and Bob Thurman, and Thurman says that you have to believe in rebirth or else the Bodhisattva ideal doesn't make sense. I don't agree with that, even though I sort of believe in rebirth. But Stephen Batchelor said very strongly when I said that to him, well, you can't do that because then you're kind of copping out on us and assuming that you can take care of it next lifetime. And you can't do that because we don't know. Anyway, that's not my answer exactly. But
Well, you know what? Dogen has a passage in a couple of different places. One is in the Being Time Fascicle, but there are other places where he talks about 4 moments of time, and they correspond to the arousing of the awakening, arousing of the aspiration for awakening, bodhicitta, which Shohaku talked about, and then practice and attainment, and then post-attainment cultivation, which ties in with Gino's approach based on Chinese teacher Zongmi. But the point I want to make is that sudden, in a way, I mean, Dogen says it a couple of different places. The moment, the instant that you have the thought that you aspire to attain enlightenment, you already are enlightened. But of course, does that make any sense? Not really, because then all of us would always be enlightened, and we wouldn't have to practice to, and he's always very concerned that these doctrines could dissuade us from practicing because they have the antinomian implication that we already have it, so we don't need to. And the Ruma sect, which was a small Zen faction, got prohibited because of that, because it seemed like they weren't following the precepts and the regulations. But I think the teaching is powerful. I don't know if this answers your question, but I think the teaching is powerful that the moment of the thought arising in you puts you in touch with a realization of the goal, the attainment of the goal. That maybe that's unrealistic, but it's inspirational from the way I would see it. Well, it's been a long day. Any final thoughts, comments? I want to say personally that the fact that to see everyone still here and enthusiastic and having this great repartee with our honored guests who've flown in and have had such a long day, is a very gratifying thing for me to see everybody so interested. So I want to say that I'm going to declare this the most successful Dogen event in the history of South Florida. Maybe even the entire Sunshine State. And I hope, thanks Shotai again. I want to thank Maria and Jenny in the Asian Studies office. I think they're outside, but thank all of you. Thank the speakers. And those of us who are meeting tonight at 7:30, we'll have some more discussion. So thank you.